A.J. Parr had an NDE that turned his life upside down. What that meant for him is that his life was then devoted to studying this phenomena and how it affects our spirituality and our religion. There are four bits in this interview I think you're going to be interested in. First off, his NDE was classic. However, there was this part where he was talking about bilocation, that ability to be two places at the same time. His was about it being in this empty state and at the same time being connected to the physical world. There was a special little bit where he talks about how he was able to touch a wall like sheetrock, touch the wall, and then be the wall touching back. Ooh, really fun. Okay, second, 2 days later, he was visited by this ancient man who gave him a poem about how the nature of reality, what is the nature of reality? Specifically, what is an illusion and what is real? Third, pay attention to are the after effects. Great. And fourth is about comparative religions. In particular, what caught my attention was this idea that each of these religions talked about the way and how it is so similar to each other. Good stuff. Okay, here is AJ's bio. AJ Parr is an internationally recognized Venezuelan journalist and Amazon best-selling author with over 20 books written on comparative religion and spirituality. He's facilitator for the International Association for Near-Death Studies and founder of IANS in Colombia. His 1991 near-death experience led AJ to study comparative religions for 3 decades and become an NDE investigative journalist. He's conducted over 100 interviews with near-death experiencers worldwide, all of which are available on his YouTube channel called AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist. He is also the founder of Grapevine Books, which has published hundreds of books on Amazon since 2011, including titles by Raymond Moody, Daniel Brinkley, Paul Perry, Melvin Morris, Kathy McDaniel, Simon Brown, and Lawrence Brock, among a bunch of other authors. Here's our interview with A.J. Parr. AJ Parr, welcome to the Afterlife Files. We are so glad that you are able to join us from Colombia.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
You have a really fascinating story, so why don't we just get into it? Tell us what happened back in 1991.
Yeah, well, in 1991, I had just turned 34, and I was kind of angry because, I had always expected that when I turned 33, which was the age Jesus Christ died, I said, okay, I'll have my super spiritual awakening. So when I turned 34, I told God, hey, I was expecting this at age 33 and nothing happened.
Oh, you didn't.
So, yeah, I did. And I was mad because I had joined the Freemasons. I had practiced uh, Hindu meditation, mantra meditation. I had researched different types of religions. I had been on a quest for many years. I have read a lot of books. And I told God, look, it's okay. If you don't want to give me anything, it's okay. I'm not going to search for anything more. Do what you want. Goodbye. It's like I broke up with a friend.
Oh
Okay.
no,
I
I
got
can't.
really
I
mad
can't.
because I was really expecting, since I was a kid, I got into spirituality like at age 16, 17. I started reading autobiography of a yogi. My father had those books. and Zen Buddhism, and then I joined different religions and all that. So 2 weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night, and this is what happened. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I gasped for air. It was like when you're drowning in a swimming pool and you come out. I simply,
Yeah.
and when I gasped for air, I remembered something that had just happened, but it wasn't like a memory. Part of it was like a memory, but the other part is like I was still there. I know you use the term bilocation.
Hmm.
Well, I was bilocated. I was still there in another dimension. I'll explain. First, the memory itself was I woke up in the middle of the night and I looked around and it was completely dark, pitch dark. I raised my hands because I wanted to see my hands and I couldn't see anything, not even my hands. So I got really scared because, well, I have always been scared of darkness, especially as a kid. And when you're a kid and are in a dark place, you start imagining monsters and whatever. So when I found myself in that pitch black darkness, I imagined that maybe there was someone or something hidden in that darkness because I would never know. So the more I thought about it, the more scared I got. And when you're scared, you feel in the middle of your chest like an empty feeling. It's more or less similar to when you fall or when you're in a car and go over a bump, you feel that expansion in your chest. So I was really frightened, and it was really noticeable the emptiness in my chest. So I got scared and I said, "Okay, I hope there's no one here." But I felt there was something or someone, and I was right because I heard a voice saying, "Surrender, all is one." As soon as I heard that, I had no option. I simply relaxed, and the feeling in my chest started growing. So I said, "Hey, wait a minute. If I'm relaxing, why is this feeling that I have always identified with fear growing?" At
Hmm.
first, I thought it was fear. It was just like fear growing. But the more I grew, the more I realized it was simply an emptiness that surrounded me, and it grew larger than myself, grew larger than everything. It was pitch dark still. And when it occupied a vast space, I simply appeared. And this is the other part that is not a memory. It's I appeared in what I call a star or the sun. I was in the middle of a body of light, but I could see up and down, to the right, to the left, in all directions at the same time. I had no thoughts. I did not say, "Hey, what's going on?" No, I had no reflection. I was simply there. I was existence itself. I was the light. I was life. I was oneness, which is also identified with love. So I was all that. I can say a simple word: bliss. That
Mm.
sums it up. Okay, so I was in this blissful state, and I don't know if it was lineal or not, but I could focus on the center of this being, and there it was, the emptiness feeling in the middle of this star. And I could also see each ray extending infinitely, because when I focused on the end, there was still uh, more light or space. It was like when you walk up to the horizon, you see the horizon and you see, okay, there's a tree in the horizon. You walk up to the tree, but the horizon continues. And it was endless. I could also focus on each ray of light. Each ray of light, each ray of light was occupying a part of that emptiness. And it had like a little empty space between one ray and the other. And that empty space was without light. It was dark. It was black. But it really had no. I could not say. I just knew it or just sensed that it was empty, completely empty. So there was. I felt full, but I also felt empty at the same time. So this sensation went on. I don't know for how long, but it seemed like that was my true essence. I could hear a roaring sound, but more than a roar that I could compare with. Uh, I cannot compare it with a roar I ever heard. It was just a like a thunderous sound that did not allow me to think, or that I was completely overwhelmed by what I was experiencing and what I was hearing. I could see all around me and I could hear that. And I don't know how long I stayed there, but all of a sudden I woke up, I took a deep breath, and I held my head. And that's when I remembered the part where I was in the void, but I also felt it's like in another mind that space where I was. So I all I could say was, "What the heck?" I couldn't understand, you know. I really used the EF word, but what the heck? And I got up from my bed really without knowing what to think or what to do. So I got up, and as soon as I got up, I could still feel that from the center of my chest, this beingness emanated from me in all directions. And I still felt that I was one with all. And almost immediately, it's like when you see a friend and you want to touch him. I went up to the nearest wall and I touched the wall, and I could feel my hand pressing against the wall, but I could also feel that I was the wall pressing back.
Um,
So again, a bilocation, because like you say, I was 100% me pressing against the wall, and I was also 100% the wall pressing back. So I immediately had an understanding of oneness. Everything is one, okay? So, but it wasn't more than an understanding, it was an experience. It was, I could experience that I was one with everything. So I spent the rest of the night. I went outside, I waited for the sunrise, and I could feel that I was one with everything, with the sky, the mountains, everything. And this gradually faded away. And I was wondering, what was this all about? Am I crazy, or was it real, or what was it? I really didn't know. Back then, I didn't know anything about near death experiences. I didn't know anything. I had always suffered from asthma. I was later diagnosed with sleep apnea. What I think is that I stopped breathing. And but back then I didn't know what to think. So I started asking God or the universe, what was that? What happened? What happened? Because I was super confused, and it was not pleasant. I would say it was distressing. Why? Because my my worldview, as some people say, was completely shattered, and I found myself like in another reality. So 2 nights later, I tried to write down. I was trying to write down my experience because I'm a journalist. I've always liked to write. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to write it down. And as I was writing it, I felt a presence. I felt like someone walked up to me from behind. I could
Mhm.
feel the presence. And I realized I could not see it, but I felt that it was a very, very old man. Somehow it seemed like my great, 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 great grandfather or something. I felt, that it was my relative somehow, but he was so old that it made me cry because I sort of felt sorry for him because he was so old. So I started crying. Uh, Not crying, tears started rolling from my eyes. And then uh, I had a notion. I, a name came to me like the elder of the ages, something like that. And also I received a poem that it didn't come in words, but since I was writing, I had my notebook, my pen, I wrote it down as soon as I felt it. It wasn't automatic writing. First it came and then I wrote.
Okay, sure.
Whereas in automatic writing, you first write and then you read. Okay? So this very brief poem somehow was the answer that I was looking for. It says this: in the beginning was the one, but the one was alone and he wanted to play. So he divided himself into two and gave number two amnesia, and thus the game began. When I heard that, especially because I had had this other experience of oneness, I understood that yes, I am part of that oneness. I am the one, but I have amnesia. And that's the game. The game is to remember who we are. So I was still, although it was an explanation, I was really blown away because it was also, I sensed that it was the creation story. It was the explanation of my experience. And it was also the hidden teachings of all the religions that I had studied, because all of them basically, this I realized this many years later, but intuitively I knew that there is a real reality, okay? Or a real world, which is oneness, which is the one. That's the real thing, oneness. And then there's this reality, the world of duality, which is an illusion, okay? So the principles of all religions is there is a real reality, which is God, oneness, the one. There's a illusory world or an illusory reality. Some call it a dream, some call it a matrix, which is this world in which we are living. And the third common factor between all religions is that the teaching, the real spiritual teaching, is how to recognize these two and differentiate and establish the difference between what is real and what is an illusion. Jesus, for example, called it the kingdom of heaven. He also talked about this world. So he established a difference. Do not gather treasures in this world, gather treasures in the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus taught that this world uh, is not really what we're here for. We are here to discover the kingdom within. The kingdom of God is within. So that difference is also found in different religions. It's found in Judaism. It's found in Hinduism and Buddhism. The thing is that this symbol, this was my first realization that this symbol of light and oneness is present in all. And what happened to me after that, I tried to, since I already had the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, I started reading them again, but this time I could spot the places where they talked about this teaching. So before I didn't know what, I read the Bible, I read the Tao Te Ching and all that, but I could not really spot the places where they mentioned this. For example, the Tao Te Ching, the Tao or the Tao, which is the supreme existing reality or God, they don't call it God, is also known as the One. And they say the Tao that you speak of or the Tao that you mention is not the eternal Tao. So whatever name we give to that reality, to oneness, is not is only an approximation.
Yep. Yep. I get that.
So we cannot give names to that which is ineffable. I had my father had the varieties of religious experiences, and I had taken that book with me, and that's where I first read about the ineffable, which is that that cannot be put in words. So I started reading the Bible, and I found things like uh, in the New Testament, John says God is light, and in Him there is no darkness. So that's sort of
Yeah.
went with what I experienced, and according to the Gospel of John, who I think is the of the four Gospels the more esoteric, he says, Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." So that the light of life, I felt when I had my experience that light, consciousness are all the same thing. That's what I experienced. It was life, it was light, it was oneness, it was love, it was bliss. Those are simply names we give to that which is ineffable, which
So,
is,
so AJ, let's go back
yeah.
to that spot in your experience because you found yourself in this place of, like you said, you were in the center of the sun or some incredibly bright thing. What was that thing that you found yourself in the center of?
No, I was not in the center. The thing is that since I could see up and down to the right, to the left, I could perceive the center. If all of a sudden you can see up and down to the right, to the left, in all directions, you would see your body in the center, right?
Okay.
There was no body. I was not there. I didn't recall ever being human. I didn't think. I was simply that. And in the middle was that sense that you have in the chest when you're falling, when it expands. That was the origin of everything, of the light. That emanated light, or that turned into light. I don't know how to describe it because
And
It's
so,
it's indescribable. It's like another dimension. How can I see myself in all directions? It's impossible. I mean, it doesn't fit in the head. The only way I can imagine it is by feeling what I felt at that moment, but I can only feel it like in another with another mind, or I don't know how to explain it. It's really strange. I cannot put it in words.
so
But
emanating from that space were these rays of light.
right, but I was also the race. I was also the center. I was also everything. I was also the empty space where that was being occupied by the light. And
Welcome to unity.
yeah, so I came out convinced of those three facts. The real reality is oneness. We are all one. We are all God. When people say that we are spirits having a human experience, no, 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 that's not it. We are God having a human experience, not spirits. We are God having a human experience. And not only that, but a subatomic particle is God having a subatomic particle experience. A tree is God having a tree experience. So it's deeper than humans are spirits having a human experience. This involves everything. Uh, everything. Everything is God that divided itself into two according to what I was given and gave itself amnesia. That's the only way that you can create duality. Or and also another thing I learned is that the only way that we can feel that we are individuals is if there are others. So the other creates the sensation, or this sensation of duality creates me and the other, the rest. So where my skin ends, supposedly I end, and the other begins. In I later, as I researched during 30 years uh, all the religions. I wrote 20 books, but I never mentioned my experience because I thought I was not allowed really, and also I could not explain it. Every time I joined a religion, I asked, for example, if I joined the Buddhist, I would ask the teacher, "Hey, have you ever had this experience? I had this experience," and no one had a similar experience. So I kind of, shoved it down, but I was still looking. So uh, it
So
was really hard.
when you were the light and these rays were emanating out, you mentioned that it was like the void, the emptiness was surrounding each of the rays as they were going out. Do I have that right?
More or less, the race occupied an empty space. The light was within a space where the light could exist. And between each ray and the other, I could see the empty space.
So is that duality where there's empty and ray?
When you feel it at the same time, there is no duality.
Right.
So that's what I figured. Uh,
So
I think
why do you think you got that experience of being the ray and the not ray, being able to perceive the
no, I think that
those two?
when I this is my personal appreciation. When you experience oneness, the opposites merge. So somehow I perceived it, or I translated when I got back Because remember, when I was there, I had no thoughts. I didn't think about what was going on. I just felt it. It's like when someone throws you in cold water, you don't have time to think. You're just, or when you get burned. And so at that moment, I had no thoughts. When I came back, I tried to explain it. And the sensation I felt, which seemed like emptiness, was the core of that experience, but it was full of light. So, how could I explain those two opposites? If it's really oneness, there should not be any opposites. However, when I translated it into words, that's how I described it. I
Mm.
was full and empty at the same time. So,
I like that. That works for me actually.
yeah.
Yeah. So have this feeling of emptiness, this feeling of oneness, have you been able to go back there again?
Yeah, well, yes. I normally, when I try to meditate, I focus on that emptiness. I still feel that emptiness in my chest. All it takes is to focus my attention to my chest, my inner attention, and I feel it. And I can make it bigger if I, sometimes by holding my breath or by breathing very slowly, it grows. However, I have not been able to go back to that same space.
Yep.
I have felt it. And if sometimes during a long meditation, I have felt it more intensely, but I have never been able to go back. I don't know if I could or should or what, but I've tried.
And what wisdom or what lessons did you learn from having this experience and or trying to get back to that experience?
Well, first of all, like I said, I started finding in all religions, I started finding traces of this knowledge. I felt that it was an ancient knowledge. And I also studied, when I studied the origins of religions, I found that the oldest figurines or sculptures were female, and that the pre-Vedic teachings before the Vedas, the uh, before the Hindus valley was civilized in the last centuries or millennia of the Stone Age, the concept of Maya existed. The concept of Maya is that this world is an illusion. And these teachings are pre-Vedic. They were not, they were adapted when the Vedas were written, supposedly by Vyasa. Uh, the religion itself was initially called Sanatana Dharma, which is the eternal way. And that came from even older religious traditions, which spoke of the veil of Maya, the how this world is an illusion, and how in order to attain spiritual awakening, we have to go through that illusion. It's also uh, it was rescued by Adi Shankara, who with the tradition of the Vedanta, which is also focused on recognizing this illusion and discovering oneness. This oneness, I also concluded, This experience of oneness is, according to some authors, and I agree, is what we call Christ consciousness, which is identifying our limited self or individuality with the wholeness of 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 this higher reality, God, or whatever you want to call it. We know that it has no name. So we call it Christ consciousness. The Hindus call it Krishna consciousness. So there are, in all traditions, they recognize this. And this experience of oneness, I think, uh, I cannot prove it, was the experience that Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and all the great avatars experienced, and that they could not put in words. If you see that, if you notice, Christ, Christ, Krishna, Buddha, they did not write anything. Other people wrote about them, but their teachings were more like parables. And even Rumi, his teachings are poems, because you cannot speak directly about this teaching, which is also hidden and secret. Because if everything is one, then good and evil are also an illusion. Nothing is evil, everything is good, but not the way we interpret goodness
Yep.
here on earth. Everything is part of the one. So
So,
that teaching is like a hidden teaching. You cannot go out. I'm saying it here because it's your podcast. Only people interested in this topic will see it. But you cannot go around in the streets telling people that good and evil are not real, because they'll start, killing each other or robbing. They'll do whatever they want, you know? And so it's the basis of what they call the secret teachings.
yep,
That's
I get it. So we have our true home and we have the illusion. Um, so in your time of studying religions and having had this experience, um, have you found a way to help people move closer to that oneness, to open themselves up to this experience? Um, I don't think any of us want to get sleep apnea in order to to find it, but
no, well, I don't think I don't think I can do it artificially. I uh, I don't think I can reproduce it. Maybe with your sound meditation, I'll try it out, but not really. I mean, this is something else. It's like when I 4 years ago, after 30 years of studying and writing books, I met a near-death experiencer. It was the first person I had ever met. She was also a journalist from Spain. She had had a near-death experience, and she wrote a book called 24 Minutes on the Other Side. And I have a publishing company. That's how I make a living. And she wanted me to translate it into English. So when I read her story, I realized that she had also been in this dark place. She had also merged with the light. And when I talked to her, I told her, look, I had this experience. And she told me, well, that dark place where you were is what we call the void. Then when I told her about the light, she said, well, I also merged with the light. I was one with everything. I experienced oneness. When I told her I could see up and down, to the right, to the left, and in all directions, she said, oh, yeah, that's what we call 360-degree vision. So I said, what? And that's when I decided, being a journalist, I said, okay, I'm going to start interviewing people and finding out if this is more common than I thought. Because back then, I didn't even watch NDE videos. I had no interests, I thought it was something else. I didn't. I had not perceived the connection between NDEs and spirituality. NDEs was something like a phenomenon. Yeah, people died and came back. But when I met her and I talked to her, I said, okay, I'm going to start interviewing people. And I started interviewing people. And not all of them, but a significant number had experienced this dark space, merging with the light, this oneness. So it took me a while. First, I started calling, during those 30 years, I called it a mystical experience. Then I started calling it a spiritually transformative experience because I thought that you had to be clinically dead because she had been clinically dead in a hospital for 24 minutes and she had her near death experience. So at first, since I had no idea, I said, no, no, I didn't die. So I didn't have a near death experience. And the more I interviewed people, the more I found that you don't have to die to have a near death experience. You can be close to death. You can be uh, drowning, about to die, and you see the light. These angels may come, or whatever you see, your dead relatives. But dying is not 100% necessary to have a near death experience. And when I met Nancy Evans Bush and I talked to her about that, she said, "Look, uh, you can be brushing your teeth and have a near-death experience." And I
Yeah.
said, "What?"
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then I realized when I interviewed Evan Alexander, he didn't die. He was in coma for several days. Even Nancy, she didn't die, but they did. She was not declared clinically dead. They never told her that she had died, but she actually left her body and had that experience. So it was more or less recently when I took the Grayson scale test and realized that, yeah, I did have a brush with death. And I consider it was a near death experience. So does Nancy, and so do other researchers that I've spoken with. So I started calling it a near death experience,
I like
although I
that.
didn't. Yeah.
I like the definition that PMH Atwater uses, which is if um, you've had a near death experience if you've touched the light.
Oh,
And and sometimes um, you can't remember because maybe you were in a car accident and it, you know,
right.
you know, damaged that short-term memory in your brain. Um, and she says the way she measures them is with the after effects and saying, okay, well, there's this list of 40 after effects, and you know, which one did you have any of these? And yeah, because I've interviewed people who've been in car accidents in particular, had that damage to the brain, and they are poster children for the after effects and have no memory at all of the incident itself. So I think that's a really nice way to think about it because there's a really famous story about a guy who went up, he's watching a football game and he goes to the kitchen, pulls a pizza out, cooks it up, and he's coming back to, finish watching the football game. And as he's walking this pizza back to the couch, boom, he has a full blown NDE. Well, it has nothing to do with walking or pizza or football.
Where,
It, ju-
where did you get that story?
it just happened. Oh, it's in the IANS database.
I'm going to look for it. Okay, continue.
Yep. And, but, he had touched the light. And there are so many people who have just instantaneously, just boom, they touch the light and they are transformed. That all those filters just disappear.
Yeah.
And
I you're
so
right.
I'm a big fan of that definition that if you've had an experience with the light, no matter how long, that qualifies you as having had an NDE because contact with the light changes you. There's something about that frequency that it just drops the filters, drops all the illusions, and
Yeah.
and you get a chance to understand who and what we are.
Now the distressing part of it is the following.
Uh-oh.
When I came back, whoever I mentioned it to, first of all, did not understand. They said I was making it up, or it was a dream, or that I was crazy.
Oh dear.
Back then, uh, I had several girlfriends after that. Every time I told my girlfriends about this, it would scare them. It would scare them. I told several of my friends, and they kind of, retreated because this came also with my explanation of religion and why all the religions have the same roots, and that's simply something that not a lot of people accept. Because, for example, if you start going to the Buddhists and you tell her, hey, but the Buddhists are not the only ones who have the path. I also realized that the Sanatana Dharma, which I said was the Hindu ancient teaching, the eternal way, the Christians were not known as Christians initially. They were known as the followers of the way. And the Chinese, the Tao is the way. So it all points out that there was an ancestral religion, perhaps in prehistoric times, and prehistoric times is only defined by the absence of written language. But they were intelligent. They were not what we think they were, like apes. No. These people created these first spiritual paths. And apparently it was known as the way. I don't know why, but that's the same name that they gave uh, to these different paths. So it was hard to explain to other people. It was hard to research. I had to do it on my own, and I felt lonely and misunderstood. But only when I found the NDE community, I found myself in the proper place. You see, I first joined Spiritual Awakenings International and then IANS. I am now a facilitator and the founder of IANS Colombia. And I can only speak about my experience in podcasts or in IANS meetings or with people like you. But these are topics that I do not share with the people I know in what I call real life, here.
Yeah.
Uh, I can mention it to my wife, but she has her own world. She's Christian. Yeah. Sometimes she says, "Hey, isn't that the work of the devil?" And I said, "No, no, no.
No,
You
no.
know me, you know." And but I don't mention it to most of the people I know because they somehow reject those topics. People also reject the topic of death. NDEs is a topic that you cannot mention to everyone because it's like the shadow, your shadow. It's an encounter with your worst fear. Your worst fear is death, and perhaps the devil. So when you talk about oneness, that there is no God and the devil and all that, people reject it.
So, how do you feel about death now?
No, I think I know. I've interviewed over 100 near-death experiencers. I've written 2 books on near-death experiences, and I've interviewed Raymond Moody and uh, Pim Van Lommel, Edgar Alexander, a lot of researchers. So I'm convinced that death is not the end. But I know that, for example, after I came back, I could sense, for example, when my mother died, I could sense when she died. I
Right.
didn't I didn't see her, but I sensed that she was there. And effectively, this was in the middle of the night also. And effectively, the following morning, I was told that she had died the previous night, and because she had been in coma for 2 years. I had I have had many uh, lucid dreams in which I wake up in the dream and I'm still dreaming, and I've met with guides and I've met with spirits or whatever, my higher self. I don't know what to call it because they don't identify themselves. And but I know that we exist, not only in this dimension. We are there. We are one. We are right now. We think we're here, but we're there. We think we walk and move, but no, we're there. You are there. I am there. We are all there, and the center of the circle is you, and at the same time it's me, and at the same time it's everything. It's kind of a geometric impossibility, but that's what I feel, that's how it works, you know. And things like quantum physics, when they say that the uh, the observer effect, I agree with that.
Yep.
When they say that this world is a matrix, yeah, of course it's a matrix, but not created by a computer or by aliens. No, it's the essence of the one becoming two and giving itself amnesia. That's the only possibility of this multiplication of beings or of entities. The duality is an illusion, but
So
we're
what
trapped in it. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, so what's next for your near-death research?
Well, I came up with this theory. I have several projects, but the one I'm working on is I call it the Tower of Babel. The uh, the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel syndrome, or the Tower of Babel theory, which is in the. I simply took it as a metaphor. Uh, in the Bible, it talks about a tower that people built in order to reach heaven, but then God decided to stop them by making them speak different languages. So this tower represents the spiritual paths that lead to God. Also, it represents NDEs. It represents mystical visions, mystical dreams, even psychedelics. When you go up that tower and you reach the top and you reach oneness, you end up speaking a different language. Why? Because right before experiencing oneness, you enter, it's called the realm of the archetypes. Jung called it the collective unconscious. It's also been known as the dream world or the spirit world. But once you're there, you will experience a different reality. Each person that rises up that tower, for example, one will see Jesus, another will see Buddha. But if two people see Jesus, this is proved by the fact that I have interviewed many people who have seen Jesus in their near-death experience. Some say he's blonde, others say he has black hair, others say he has white hair. No, he has blue eyes. No, 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 he has brown eyes. So what's going on there? Okay, I cannot doubt that they all saw Jesus. However, when they describe Jesus, they each represent him differently. So there is an observer effect when you reach those dimensions right before oneness, right before experiencing oneness, you reach what we call the spirit world, or I don't know, you know the astral world a lot. But the higher astral is connected somehow with oneness or that realm. And that's an archetypal plane or realm in which an Eskimo 500 years ago will see Eskimo gods. An African in the African jungle 500 years ago, who never stepped out of the jungle, has never seen a white man, will see the African gods. An Egyptian will see a light being and he will say, Ra. A Christian will see a light being, this beautiful light being who is the incarnation of God. He says, Jesus. But maybe a Greek had a near death experience 3,000 years ago, and he said, I met Apollo. And if he would have asked that being, are you Apollo? He would say, I have been given many names. And that's something I have found when people have a near death experience. There is a Son of God, there is a representation, a light being who is the incarnation of God. And he has had many names. He's Jesus, but he's also anyone you want. He has many names. I don't know. So,
We are bumping up against our time limit. AJ, this has been just wonderful. What idea would you like to leave with those who are going to watch this video? Wrap this up with something awesome.
well, I say that life is worth living, but death will be worth living as well. We don't really die; we continue living, and our path, the true spiritual path, according to me, you don't have to believe this, is to remember our home, which is oneness. To remember, this is the game that the one started. The one gave us amnesia so we could forget and become individuals. But the game is a game of hide and seek. We have to go back to the source and discover who we really are. So we are deathless. We were never born. Time and space do not exist. Those are also part of the illusion. So when we say, when was this universe created? Will we die? No, it has always existed. When there is no time and no space, then we cannot speak in rational terms. Reality is beyond an understanding. Just like when you are making love, that is beyond any way of describing it. When you drink water, you cannot describe it. And when you're happy, you cannot describe it. So this life is ineffable. Not only spiritual experiences are ineffable, life itself is ineffable. So that chattering mind that we have, that chattering voice, is also an illusion. So that can help you calm down when in times of trouble.
I love that. AJ Parr, thank you for being with us here on the Afterlife Files.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure. I love the work you're doing and I love your podcast.
And thank you. And for those of you watching, stick around for just a second because I've got a really interesting comment that came out of this interview. So we'll see you on the flip side. When describing near death experiencers, usually there is a list of common elements. And number one on that list is almost always the word ineffability, which is a great English word that means we don't have a great English word to describe what's going on here in this experience. You will notice that AJ has difficulty trying to describe the unity experience. We have to remember that he's using words from a dualistic universe to describe one in of a unity universe. And these dualistic words just don't have the strength, the breadth, the power to get us there. So I've got a couple of metaphors that help describe this. Think of a person who lives in a two-dimensional plane. All they know is width and depth. And all of a sudden, somebody comes along and says, hey, there's another dimension. It's a third dimension of height. Now, the people who've only lived in two dimensions are going, hey, that's really cool, but I just have to trust you because I don't have any experience that will stretch me into that third dimension. Or think of somebody who's been blind since birth, and your job is to describe to them what is red. And you can use all different kinds of words and experiences, but you just can't really get them there because they haven't had that experience of color. So I think what's incumbent upon us is that we have to cut these people a break because they are trying to describe something that we don't have. I mean, we've got three, four dimensions with time experience, but they're taking us to the fifth dimension. And, not many of us have had that experience, and that's okay. We just have to, wear a different hat and be able to go with them and intuit what it is that they're trying to describe for us because they're taking us into a whole new world with a whole different set of rules and um, different experiences that are really difficult to describe here in our physical world. So I think of books that you might have read about people who have been enlightened or awakened in some way. And the language in those books is often awkward and a little stilted. They're having to use metaphors to describe something, but they can't quite exactly get there because we don't have that language. So, ineffability, it's a wonderful thing because at least we're trying to get there and, wear that hat of trust and see if your intuition can kind of help you understand and explain the situation. Thank you for being with us on the Afterlife File. Really nice of you to be here. We'll see you next time.